improving food literacy at TUSD.
It's more alarming for me to go into classrooms where students have never seen how a carrot grows.
And an effort to get historic landmark status for one of Tucson's oldest neighborhoods.
There is nothing else like Barrio Viejo in the United States.
This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Vanessa Barchfield. Thanks for joining us. This week, we're taking a look at works in progress around Tucson. From a partnership between TUSD and the Community Food Bank to a medical devices company that's testing a new treatment for macular degeneration. We'll be talking to people with big goals that could change Tucson or the lives of people here. All that after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
On Tuesday, the governing board for the Tucson Unified School District formally approved a contract for the district's newest superintendent. Gabriel Trujillo had been serving in an interim position for almost 6 months when the contract was announced. He will make $200,000 a year with additional benefits, such as $5,000 for performance pay and $20,000 for travel and other expenses. Trujillo obtained his doctoral degree at Arizona State University and was working in Phoenix before moving to Tucson last year. A Southern Arizona Economic Development Group hopes that retail giant Amazon will build a new North American company headquarters in our community. Local officials are trying to attract the company, which is looking for a location with more than 1 million residents, good air service, and financial incentives. As a way to stand out, Tucsonans shipped a real 21-foot saguaro to Amazon near Seattle, but that tactic drew criticism from many residents in Southern Arizona since the cactus will most likely die away from its environment. Boston, Toronto, Phoenix, and other cities are also interested in the new headquarters. And NASA's Cassini mission ended its 13-year exploration of Saturn this week. Current and former University of Arizona planetary scientists were at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California to witness the spacecraft's grand finale, flying into the ring planet's atmosphere where it burned. Scientists plan to continue studying the planet from the data they collected until the very end. For more on all of the week's top news, visit our website, news.azpm.org.
First up, a look at an effort in Tucson's biggest school district to teach kids about where food comes from and to get fresh, healthy produce onto a bigger portion of their lunch trays.
Raise your hand if you say, no, plants do not have a sense of touch. They can't feel things.
Ronnie Olson's full official title is Tucson Unified School District's Farm to School Chef.
So I work on the Farm to School program. I work on the Garden to Cafeteria program, and then a food literacy program to help kind of bridge the gap between those two programs.
TUSD's Farm to School program aims to increase the volume of local produce that students in the district are eating. We'll talk more about that later, but first, her other initiatives.
The Garden to Cafeteria program is the opportunity for schools that have school gardens or that are interested in building and growing school gardens to be able to use that produce that they're growing in their cafeteria. The food literacy is the idea of trying to incorporate more food systems education within our schools and within our classrooms. And I think that that can be a really great opportunity for students to better connect with their environment, is to realize that we're kind of all part of this larger system. The plant world is not that different from our world. Do you guys think that plants can taste? I feel like yeah. Knowing how food grows is really important because it's how our environment functions, and we're part of that. It's more alarming for me to go into classrooms where students have never seen how a carrot grows and not to be able to identify that the root of the carrot is a root, the bottom half of it grows underground, and the top part is green. There are green things that coming out of it, and those are edible too. But not having a context about that food actually comes from a place and they're grown and people do that as a career. That's what's been more alarming for me, is that we aren't, as people, able to make good decisions or positive decisions in our livelihood if we don't have a context about how it affects everything else around us.
Right now, Ronnie's food literacy program is being run in 15 of TUSD's 89 schools, but she has big plans for the future.
Big picture goal is that every student and every educator in the schools in our community, not just within our school district, have access and resources to school gardens or community gardens, that they're integrated daily into their lessons and into their curriculum, and that students are able to make these connections of and like to feel empowered about making positive choices around food, around our food system, around how food grows. Those are empowering skills.
This is all very long-term change Ronnie's working on. There's also the day-to-day work of ensuring that kids in TUSD have enough food to eat and that it's healthy. That's a challenge in a district where more than 70% of kids qualify for free and reduced lunches.
I think that it's a huge responsibility to be able to think about a district kind of being the foundation of feeding a giant population of our youth in our community. And there are plenty of resources with that throughout the community that are in similar boats. I mean, definitely other school districts. The Community Food Bank does an amazing service of feeding people that are in need as well. The Boys and Girls Club, there are a lot of programs out there, and I think that as a community, the more that we can move together in creating a system where we can figure out how to provide healthier, more nutritious, fresher foods to students and to our community, I think the better off we all are.
One way TUSD is doing that is through its farm-to-school partnership with the Community Food Bank. Audra Christoffel is Ronnie's counterpart there. Audra says the food bank's been working with farms in southern Arizona for the past decade, and they realized that one of the challenges was actually a big opportunity.
It really became obvious that a lot of farms are not able to sell everything that they produce. Farmers markets are not really sure sales routes. They're not secured buys.
The community food banks played an important role, bridging the gap between farmers and the bureaucracy at TUSD.
TUSD's purchasing system is this very complex, has complex procedures and pieces, and so farmers just weren't at a place where they could take that on themselves, and TUSD, wasn't really ready or interested or able to work with individual farms. So a lot of it has been, kind of coordinating together and figuring out, okay, how do we get farms really communicating with each other and planning together and pooling, their resources to be able to fill some of TUSD's needs.
TUSD and the food bank launched the partnership 2 years ago, and they've learned a lot over that time.
I think we're working out a lot of the challenges still, but I think that looking at where we were exactly 2 years ago, amazing. I think we're in a great space. There are a few things that are a little bit more comfortable kind of moving the school year forward, but there are still, it's a work in progress.
A work in progress with really big goals.
I feel like the goal is a more sustainable community on a very large scale, and as we move forward in these programs, we're learning where those little pockets are to help make that happen. So,
And I think part of that looks like when farms are economically sustainable, when it's really viable for them and they have enough sales outlets that really support their business, that means that, we can support more farms in this region in the future. Right now, some farms might say, I don't know if I would recommend to a young person in southern Arizona if they should really start a farm because it's really hard. So I think the long-term vision is to say, how can we make this food system really work for everyone, including consumers, including farms, including kids who, can learn about where food really comes from and maybe one day decide that they want to be a farmer and that's like a success and that's really a viable option for a livelihood and a really healthy future.
Now we meet two Tucsonans who are leading an effort to get Barrio Viejo designated as a National Historic Landmark.
So in the United States, there are a number of different types of historic designations that can be applied to different areas or places that have significance to the story of Americans' history.
Parts of Barrio Viejo have been listed on the National Registry of Historic Places for about 4 decades. A higher level of recognition is the National Historic Landmark Program,
which really seeks to identify the places that are most important in the United States for their cultural heritage. In southern Arizona, we have 3 sort of well-known historic landmarks. We have the San Javier del Bac, Tumamoc Hill, and we have the Titan II missile silo. In sort of over the last few years, as development has occurred downtown, and pressure has been put on the historic districts, we really thought this might be a good application of this type of designation in this area, because there is nothing else like Barrio Viejo in the United States. Look at this with the cornice work.
And look at the base here where it
Barrio
has-
Viejo is truly from Tucson. It's vernacular to this place, people who lived here, and it was really a crossroads of cultural traditions and different cultural groups who lived in the 14-block radius. But people went to the river, they collected water, they collected mud, they mixed it with sand on the site, and they built adobe buildings in a Sonoran row house form, which you really see in northern Mexico. And it's really part of the sort of transformation of architecture into the United States in the 1800s and into the early 1900s. And so it really is distinctive and unique and quintessentially Tucson.
In the mid-1960s, a large portion of the barrio was razed for an urban development project. It's the area that's now home to the Tucson Convention Center and City Hall.
Unfortunately, at that time, people saw this as simply a slum. And if you talk to people who were involved in that planning, they felt they were improving the city by taking this out. Fortunately, citizens got together and called a halt before they could build the freeway the Butterfield Freeway that they had intended to run basically down Cushing Street. And if that had occurred, we would have lost what we have. So we have a remnant, but it's a significant remnant. And we need to make sure that we don't repeat our history of destroying what's important to us. I think what's exciting about this project is that it has community support of a probably unprecedented kind. And part of that is that it's been set up as a volunteer documentation program. So we have actually worked with approximately 50 to 60 volunteers who are out on the street doing the documentation of the buildings themselves, which is something that really hasn't been pursued strategically before.
Under the Obama administration, the National Park Service made a real push and really created a series of initiatives to designate properties and places associated with underrepresented communities, whether it was the LGBT community or the Mexican American community. And so out of that effort, there was a lot of support for initiatives like this to be able to tell the broad spectrum of America's stories. Because I think the National Register for the last 40 years has really done a great job of telling the story of America, but it's really told it in a very narrow sense, through architecture, through sort of more traditional, Anglo narrative. And so to spread that story and really begin to tell the full spectrum of the American experience was part of the National Park Centennial. So it really is, it's about expanding the way that we think about our history and really telling the full breadth of America's story. So this corner of Simpson and Meyer, what we see is in downtown Tucson a huge surge in redevelopment, and there are lots of redevelopment opportunities in and around downtown, and that's putting additional pressure onto the surrounding historic neighborhoods. And so I think putting a designation like this on Barrio Viejo will help inform how development occurs on the edge of this district and how we think about this district and its relationship to new construction.
With all the development happening in the area, I wonder what the gentrifying effect the designation would have on this historically Mexican-American neighborhood.
In some ways, what is considered traditional gentrification has already happened in part of the barrio. And you can see that where residences have been converted into law offices or things like that. But part of the area that we are including in this larger segment for the national landmark has not been really gentrified to that point. And so part of the emphasis here, and Damien and I have been very concerned about this from the beginning, is to find ways through this to make sure that people can keep their homes, they can repair their homes, that we're not going to be moving people out.
Our goal and our intention is to be really thoughtful with these types of tools and ensure that we are really preserving, as Helen said, the heritage of this place, and merging it with a much broader understanding of why this place matters and why it's worth saving and why it is special and why we should continue to invest resources and energy into protecting places like this that are distinct to Tucson.
CLECO says the historic landmark designation process will be ongoing for the next few years. And now we turn to works in progress in medicine. Macular degeneration is the leading cause of vision loss in the U.S., affecting more than 10 million Americans. One Tucson startup is developing a device that could offer hope for some people afflicted with the incurable disease.
There's two types of macular degeneration. There's dry, and then it later progresses to wet in some cases, and not all.
Ryan Lorenz is the CEO at Salutaris Medical Devices.
We make a medical device for the treatment of wet macular degeneration, and we are currently in the investigational phase of that device.
It's estimated that more than 200,000 people in the U.S. are diagnosed with wet macular degeneration each year. The disease leads to the growth of abnormal blood vessels underneath the macula that leak blood and fluid.
Typically, macular degeneration, it usually starts actually in that normal blind spot area. So in the very central part of your vision, you would see some distortion.
As that distortion happens, reading becomes very difficult, facial recognition becomes very difficult, and it's really debilitating to the elderly. And it happens rather quickly. If it's untreated, they can go from relatively healthy vision to blind in a matter of months.
Right now, wet macular degeneration is typically treated by injecting drugs directly into the eye.
The drugs that are currently out there seem to really work for some people and sort of stabilize some people and then not work for some people. And there's not a lot of good data out there as to why that is.
But what there is good data on is how much wet macular degeneration, sometimes called wet AMD, is costing.
Because this is a disease that generally hits older people, the average age is somewhere between 60 and 70 that a lot of people develop this particular disease. So obviously as everyone is living longer and baby boomers are more of them are coming to that age group, the impact of this overall disease on our health system and the health systems worldwide is going to be huge.
We've looked at line items from Medicare, and it turned out in 2014, I believe, the number 2 and number 3 line items in terms of drugs were wet AMD products. So it's a huge amount of money for them.
Salutaris is testing a new form of treatment. Instead of injecting drugs, it uses radiation.
Attempts at radiation have been made in the past for various reasons. They've showed promising results and then failed for one way or another. An early attempt was to actually go in through the front of the eyeball and actually penetrate the eye and apply radiation from the inside. Because things had to be kept quite small to do that, the radiation projected a very small area, and it's our belief that the dose wasn't adequate to treat the lesion. So our device is different in that it's sort of a curved shaped device, which we can show you.
So this is our applicator. This is a single-use disposable device. Our radiation source is actually loaded into the well here.
What the procedure is a patient would go into an outpatient surgery center, much like that they would have just another surgery where they would go in and get to go home the same day. And they would go underneath just a little bit of anesthesia. The doctor would give them anesthesia directly to the eye, and that anesthesia would make their eye not move, and it would make all of the light perception so that everything would go black and they wouldn't be able to move their eye. And then the surgeon would make a very small incision
and place the applicator in that incision and place it retrobulbar to the back of the eye.
Right behind the macula and held in place for about 5 minutes.
And then it's removed back the same way. So the device itself never goes into the globe of the eye. It goes all the way around, and then the procedure is done. It takes about 15 minutes in total in the operating room, and then the patient gets to go home later the same day.
We have a strong belief that radiation does work to treat macular degeneration. We're still investigating that, so we can't say that it does, but we have a belief that it does. And our delivery method is unique, and we think it solves a lot of the problems that have been met in the past.
The company has just opened its clinical trial.
We're recruiting 20 people. We expect the recruitment process to take about a year, and then there's a year follow-up on the patients in the study.
So what does success look like at Salutaris?
First of all, getting the enrollment that we want in the time period that we want, and then the outcomes of that study being something, number one, that we can show that the device is safe, that the physician can do the procedure very easily, and also that we get some data that will lead us to designing a larger clinical study that would encompass more patients and more sites and more data.
The ultimate goal is to show insurance companies, Medicare, that they could actually save a lot of money by not having to do these injections quite so frequently. So that's the next sort of big hurdle we have to do, is to prove that there's a big benefit to the economy to go with our device.
And that's a ways away. In the meantime, trials will proceed, and Mary Drew says, yes, it's about money and the economy, but it's also about individuals.
You know, losing your vision at a later stage in life is particularly detrimental. And so I think it's about quality of life, and it's about making people's lives better, and it's about giving them, not making it so that they can continue doing the things that they love and not lose vision, because it's a big part of our lives. For more information on their trial, visit clinicaltrial.gov. Downtown Tucson is in the midst of a major transformation. Ron Schwabe is one of the developers that's leading that change. We went to his offices this week to talk about his plans and his history working downtown.
Boy, we've been here a long time. We started working in downtown Tucson in the late 90s, and at that time we had an office in Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon's urban scene was just blossoming, and we were certain that it was going to happen in Tucson, but at that time it had the lowest rents across the board, residential, commercial, office, everything. A lot of vacancies. Fast forward 20 years later, you know, we have the highest rents across the board. So, but that was, you know, back in the 90s, and it was a long slog. It really took until about 2008 before things started to kind of turn.
You won the bid to redevelop the Ronstadt Center a few years ago. What's the status on that project right now?
About 2 years out. We're still in the process of finalizing agreements with the City of Tucson and the Federal Transportation Administration. The City of Tucson and the FTA are partners on the property. I'd have to say, after 2 years, we're having a lot more progress than we had, you know, prior, but I mean, that's still a long time, so.
Do you have any idea when we can expect to start seeing some
construction?
Yeah.
It's probably I mean, realistically, probably a year out, at least. I mean, unfortunately.
So there are a few major developers in downtown Tucson, Peach Properties, of course, being one of them. Is there anything that you're doing that really distinguishes you from the others?
We started in a lot of reuse projects, and we still do a number of reuse projects, but we've sort of transitioned that into larger full block projects and that sort of thing. I mean, I guess we have a kind of a track record of going out of our way to save whatever you know, there's very few historic structures remaining in the downtown, and so we kind of go out of our way to try to maintain them and to integrate them into, you know, a bigger plan.
And speaking of historical buildings, of course, one of your other projects is the Chicago store block. What's going on there?
Yeah, real exciting block. I mean, it's about 40,000 square feet of mostly retail, street retail. We're working with Loft Cinemas to bring them back, bring them downtown, which is a first-run movie theater. We're in negotiations with Starbucks, which 20 years ago they wouldn't look at the downtown. They're finally coming back to the downtown. And a number of other retailers. 1055 Brewery, we signed a lease with them on part of that space. It's you know, just that block is really gonna light up. It's a great block. It's got great historical texture there.
It was announced that CVS would be coming into the building. Is that still in the works?
That's not going forward, and they spent a lot of money on plans, and we're very serious on going in, and they've had sort of a strategic shift in their bricks and mortar stores and secondary markets particularly, and I think just in general they're kind of reassessing their retail model.
So are you looking for a new tenant there, or you already have one?
Yeah, we have literally that building refilled with I think there's 3-4 different tenants, but they're not finalized leases or anything, but it's a great, great space and lots of interest in it.
Downtown Tucson has been, of course, a work in progress for a while now, and it still, very much is changing. How do you think downtown Tucson will look in 10 years?
I think it's going to be a world-class downtown. I mean, it has, that authenticness that it needs. It's tiny, it's very manageable as far as, getting around. It's just, I think it, you get out to different downtowns and there's some that just really feel like they have like a real soul, and this is one of those cities. When we worked with Williams and Dame, a developer out of massive, international developer out of Oregon, on the 1 North 5th apartments, they had all kinds of, offers to do work in Phoenix. I mean, the founder of the company, Homer Williams, just said, I don't feel good up here in Phoenix. And he likes Tucson, and we did that deal, and they'd like to do more here. And there's that kind of, intangible that Tucson has.
Are there any other projects that you're working on or that other people are working on that you're really excited about?
I'm excited about all of them. I mean, it's just great to see all this stuff going on. I mean, there's four cranes up in the air right now in downtown. I mean, it's great.
Tucson can be a hard place for outdoor sports in the summer months. Caleb Gutierrez has a plan to develop the Cushing Street underpass into a shaded park for Tucson skaters.
I started skating when I was 11 years old. I grew up in Oracle, Arizona, and we didn't have a skate park till I was around 17 years old. So I just started skating like at the school, post office, grocery store, flat ground, just on the street. And that's just kept doing it. Just skating's my life. Art, music, everything is around skateboarding.
In the summer, though, he skates much less.
90% less. It's only at nighttime, and then still at night, the concrete's still hot. It's packed even more because people are going at night. Early in the mornings, but it's hard to wake up at 6 in the morning and go skate.
A few years ago, Caleb started going through this underpass on his way to get coffee.
And I'd see the spot every morning, and it'd just be empty. It's just trash and gravel.
So he started thinking,
it could be a skate park, which is now in the works. It could be basketball courts. It could be land for farmers markets, just with shade. Really cool area. You can park your car and walk under, or take the light rail and get under here. So seeing it every day was just kind of like a dream.
Caleb and a friend applied for a $200,000 grant from the company Vans and almost got it, except they didn't have the city's approval.
We both went to the city council meeting, and we told them what we were trying to do, told them about how we got denied by Vans because we didn't have the city's approval. And then they all liked it, and they all said, okay, we'll talk to you after the meeting. Then after that, it just started happening. So now it's all green lights with ADOT, the city, and the Parks and Recs.
Now that they have approval, they're working on designs.
So that's kind of like one big issue that we have, like what's going to look like, because there's so many different types of skaters in town and parks so everyone can skate. So we have pool skaters, we got the street skaters, flat ground, like just everything. So the park right now, we're in a very large space, so we wanted to have everything so everyone can come skate. So I think we're going to have a community outreach, so skaters and people can come and give their opinion what the park should look like. But after that, we'll see. Right now, I want everyone to be happy.
Another big part is raising money, $400,000. The project got nonprofit status recently, and Caleb thinks that'll encourage people and companies to donate. When would he like to see it open?
We are in September now, and to see this park go up would be awesome before summer hits, so we can get the experience, like a fresh new park in the summer, see how it feels like. The main thing about this project is the sun. This is the first shaded skate park in Arizona, so which is really big deal. That's what I think. It's a really big deal for us.
To learn more about the skate park, visit TucsonParks.org. That's our show this week. Keep up with all the latest news from Southern Arizona on our website, news.azpm.org. Thanks so much for watching.